my aim has definitely always been ultimately to produce a crop that I believe forests should create timber and should produce timber products. And then I suppose the journey has been about what other things can they produce along the way. Multi-objective management, it's about delivering multiple things. And I was taught, and I really learnt to see now, that forests can deliver a very wide range of benefits. I think for us it's understanding that in fact it doesn't matter what you're trying to enhance in the forest, whether it's timber production or tourism or biodiversity. Management is always, you still have to do some active management to achieve those goals. It was a bit of a brave initial idea when I said to people I wasn't going to use any protection in terms of tree tubes on trees. A lot of people said that you'd just be decimated by the deer. What we did was not in any way trying to eradicate the deer, but just temporarily to take their numbers down within the area we'd planted, which we did successfully for 5 or 6 years, and we had fast enough growth that after 5 or 6 years the trees were up above where deer would damage them. So what we're looking at here is some of the remnants of a block of woodland that was planted in the 60s. So these trees here are the remnants of the 1960s crop, and then through it we've got an area which is only 12 years old. It makes for a very nice kind of mixed structure in the forest, so we're not ending up with all of the forest at an even age. Obviously if you have an even age forest, you've only got one structure and one ecosystem, but if you end up with a more diverse structure to forest, so you end up with some area which is 10, 12 years old, some at 60 years old, then you also end up with a very diverse ecosystem and biodiversity and structure to the forest. Try to get the forest to regenerate underneath itself, and what's called continuous cover forestry. And so here, for instance, we've managed to get quite a good regeneration of beech and fir and Douglas fir underneath the existing crop. So as the forest sort of transitions from planting it and establishment through to management, we have to start thinning. So we're trying to select out the poorer form trees, ones that are bent, forked, twisted, and we take them out of the forest because you're trying to favour the better trees to grow them on for the future. And so you've got to do something with those. And you could sell them as just a raw material, just a stack of timber at roadside. But for me, the better option was to try to add value at source. So instead of just selling a raw material round wood in 2-metre lengths on a lorry sold to someone else, we cut it up here in the yard and we turn it into firewood. Because we've got the biomass boiler as well, it's an opportunity to kiln dry it. We use the whole tree, so the bottom part of the tree, the biggest, fattest part, goes off to a sawmill as a saw log, and they mill it and they produce garden sheds and fencing and carcassing and roof timbers. The next part of the tree we use for firewood, and that's brought here and processed and turned into logs and then kilned and then delivered to the customer. And then the top of the tree we also use by chipping that up and feeding that into our biomass boiler. So we have a biomass boiler here that not only heats 4 holiday cottages, and so we haven't used any oil here on the farm for 20 years, but then we also heat our kiln to dry the firewood using that same biomass boiler. So one of the things I sort of realised quite early on, once I'd planted the trees, was that although I had a 10-year payment from the government for establishing that crop, I could see that was going to run out. So to fill that sort of 10-year gap, I began to develop holiday cottages. I realised that there was a good market in southwest in Devon for holiday cottages, and so I took some of the grant revenue I'd made in planting the trees and I invested that in doing up some of the old farm buildings. Initially, obviously, once you're establishing a forest, there's no timber products come out, but so one of the things we did early on was to sell venison. So we set up a small venison burger and sausage business, and we sold burgers at local shows and things like that, because we were trying to reduce the deer population in order to establish the trees. We sell all sorts of diverse products. We've sold ship's masts over the years, we've sold teepee poles. You're producing landscapes, you're producing biodiversity, you're producing clean water for the environment. So to me, that's the best thing about a forest really, is that it's this amazing factory which produces one tangible product, but it also produces a whole load of intangible benefits. We're putting money into the economy locally, we're engaging with the local community. We've had schools here, we've had universities here, we have local meetings of farmers. My top 3 tips if I was establishing a forest now, planting a new forest, would be, 1, to take advice. So there are local small-scale managers and consultants who advise on forestry planting, and they understand the job. The second top tip, I think, would be about looking to the future. It's not just about creating woodland, it's about how you then help that woodland and manage it to transition from establishment, which is just planting trees on some land, to taking it into hopefully a growing, working, active forest. And then my third tip really would be about thinking outside the box, which is there are alternative markets. You know, there's glamping, there's wild swimming, there's all sorts of sort of nature-based activities, and that's really grown as an industry in the UK, and forests are a great environment for that.